If you're an average player, you want to be left alone, all right, because you want to be able to slide by. If you're a good player, you want to be coached. If you're a great player, you want the coach to tell you the truth every day. Did I hustle on that play? Did I make the right read? Did I play the guy with the right leverage? You want to know every play, because you know why? They want to be perfect. Everybody here makes a choice to do one of those three things.
Welcome to the GOAT Consulting Podcast, a podcast dedicated to people striving to be a GOAT, the greatest of all time, serving it up in a way that you can get it in all stages of life.
Hey, I'm Colby Jubenville, and welcome to another episode of the GOAT Consulting Podcast, right here in studio in VC Productions in Nashville, Tennessee. We got a great second part to our show today. It is with Jim Cripps.
Yes.
Jim has done so many things. He's a business and sales coach. He's a speaker, VP, COO, team builder, biohacker. We haven't even dug into the biohacker. World record holder.
Specifically, Guinness Book of World Record.
And we just
holder.
found out prior to the show that John is as well. Hopefully we'll be able to tell that story today. He has been on
after class.
shows like the GOAT Consulting Podcast, Good Morning America, Jimmy Kimmel Live, and a Japanese TV show called Unbelievable. I want to go and be on that show.
Yeah.
I think my life would just be a great story for Unbelievable. Thank you to Russell Stroud and RWS Services Plumbing. They do a great job for us. We appreciate you funding the show. We are the GOAT Consulting Podcast. We serve it up in a way that you can get it. We're like Waffle House. And we're so glad that Jim is with us today. John, you always find the great guests, and excited for Jim to be here today. We had a great conversation in part one of the show.
Yes.
And now we're into part two. And
We're going to pick it right up where we left off
Yeah.
in part one. And I got to tell you, Jim, when we connected back in probably November, December, or maybe early December, somewhere around there, I remember asking you this question because as our good friend and also GOAT GCP alumni, Randy Huth, that made the connection for us, I remember thinking, how do we have – I mean, obviously you belong on the show. There's nobody on the planet in the history of the universe that has ever done what you've done. You belong here.
Well, thank you.
And I struggle. This is what I shared with you early on, and your answer was so beautiful that I've looked forward to talking about it in this moment ever since. Maybe in one of the top 5 moments that we've had in our 100 episodes.
Wow.
Because it's so meaningful for me. And that question that I said to you, some version of, I don't really believe in perfection. You know, in the intro of the show, you've got Saban talking about we want to be perfect. And I think anytime that creeps into my mind, as I've said in the past, like wherever perfection is, shame is typically riding shotgun. And maybe it's something in certain areas of our life that we strive towards. But the problem is with you, Jim, and what you've done, unlike life and most everything else, you can actually be perfect in bowling. And that's what you've done.
Right.
So how do we even talk about, there's like this conflict happening within me when I first thought about you and this conversation and your response to me, that like you knew I was going to ask it, was everything about that day was imperfectly perfect or perfectly imperfect. One of those versions you said. So please walk us through that day and what that means, that all these imperfections added up to something that has never been done before, and you did it.
Right.
Congratulations on that, by the way.
Well, thank you.
It's incredible.
I appreciate it. Well, before I do that, I'm going to tell you just one thing that I think will help you with the idea of perfection. Because when we think of perfection, we think of perfection on this long scale. And it's all these things that we do to get to perfect moments that we would not change for anything in the world. And that's really how that was that day for me. So it started off rough. I had a new bowler on my team for this year, and he had just moved to Clarksville. And he called me one day. He said, "Jim, I'm thinking about bowling in the city tournament. I'm sure you probably already got a teammate, or would you bowl with me?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." I said, "Actually, I haven't bowled in that tournament in over a decade." And that was a really critical tournament for me early on because there was a bowling center in Clarksville that kicked me out, and I was not allowed to bowl there. And back in 2002, 2003, somewhere around in there, the city tournament was being held at, they usually hold it in two centers, so that team events in one and singles and doubles in the other. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't going to bowl that tournament. And Doug Hayes, who's a legend in Clarksville and really just in bowling, period, called me one day and said, hey, I want you to bowl with me. I said, Doug, I'm not bowling in the tournament. They won't let me bowl in that center. He goes, Jim, you're going to bowl because you're going to be my doubles partner. And Doug held high average in the city and I think in the state for a long time. And for him to do that, I said, Doug, I'm not trying to be that guy. They don't want me there, I won't be there. And he goes, Jim, it's about more than that. We're going to stand behind you and you're going to bowl. And they did. They absolutely. The proprietor was angry about it. And
it's like this is a lot of drama.
It was a lot of drama.
Movie.
It's wild.
And him and the association backed me up, and they said, we're going to move the tournament if you don't let him bowl. And we bowled. Well, fast forward, I hadn't bowled in it in probably 10 years, just for the sheer fact that I had been so focused on work that bowling had kind of taken a back step. And so I agreed to bowl with him. Well, earlier that week, about a week before, I'd gotten a splinter in my thumb and tried to get it out, couldn't get it out. And that morning I woke up and it was swollen and angry and red. There was no way it would go into a bowling ball. And my wife asked me, she goes, well, you're going to call and let him know you can't bowl? I said, honey, I'm not the guy that bails on somebody. And she goes, no, I know you're not. She goes, but there's no way you can bowl like that. So I told her, I said, I'm going to figure this out. So I go in there, I get an 18-gauge needle, which is a pretty big boy needle to be shoved in your thumb.
You went in where to get an 18-gauge needle? Well, to the bathroom?
To the bathroom. I'm a
Of course, because we all have that in the drawer with our hairdryer, right?
It's the biohacker portion.
I went in there
into his serial killer closet.
Went in there and got my. Did you call it? What did you call it?
It's 18 gauge.
18 gauge needle.
Yeah.
I'm blessed.
And
you went in where?
Just the drawer,
All right. Okay. This is the plot thickens.
So I go in there and I basically do surgery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope you did.
Yeah. And so I'm drawing fluid. I mean, it's disgusting, but I'm drawing fluid off my thumb. It's getting smaller. Still couldn't get into a bowling ball. And I told my wife, I said, I'm just going to have to cut it open and get this splinter out of there.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what you do.
Yeah.
So cut it open, get it out of there, ice it, stick it in a bowling ball for a little while because, you press it down into something and, it kind of forces the blood and all things back out of there.
Now we are T-minus how many hours till you're bowling the first ball? Okay, 90 minutes.
90 minutes.
90 minutes out.
Probably 2 hours when I started surgery on it to, time to go. And so I'm there and I'm angry. I'm frustrated like anybody would be, And this was a different day because my wife had something going on that morning, so my son was going to go with me to the tournament. And he hardly ever gets to go bowling with me just because, league is past bedtime for a 9-year-old and all those things. And prior to this point, he had never shown any interest in bowling. So he's begrudgingly going to go to the bowling center with me. And I just looked at myself in the mirror. I don't even know why I caught myself other than, just you're in the bathroom in the mirror. And I noticed how pissed I looked. I did not look ready to go do anything other than just be mad. And I'm a big fan of self-talk. It's real. Perception is reality. And what a lot of people don't talk about is the fact that your perception of you is your reality.
Sure.
And so I had to get my mind right. So I gave myself a pep talk and, went and took my vitamins, all the things I would normally do on a day that I was going to go win. And I looked in the mirror right before I left and I said, it'd be a pretty good day for a 300. And I've never said that before in my entire life. Like, why that came to be, I have no idea. And when I said it, I actually laughed at myself in the mirror and then walked out. So son gets in the car, we go to Clarksville, and Brenda Green, she runs youth bowling in Clarksville, and she's been around for forever. Mm-hmm. And she's only like 29. She's not old enough to be forever. But anyway, she saw me bring in Castle, and she goes, oh, you brought your coach today. And so, they had a little dialogue because, like I say, she's great with the youth bowlers. And so they chatted a little bit. And I said, yeah, I told him it'd be a great day for a 300. And she goes, this place would be on fire. She goes, they would love it. And I was like, and I just kind of laughed and we went on about our business. And so I'm still kind of, figuring out how's this going to work, whatever. Yeah. And so the guys bowling on the pair with me and my doubles partner, is a guy from Ohio and his son that just happened to move to Clarksville. And I always try to warn people. I said, hey, I don't bowl like everybody else. And of course they were all like, hey, no, we've seen it all. Don't worry.
Neither do we.
Yeah. And of course you throw that first ball and now they realize what they're in for.
Right.
And fast forward, so I record second games typically. And the reason for that is I know that I do better under pressure. So the more people watching, the more on the line, the better I do. And what I've found is when I record, it elevates my heart rate. So sometimes I'll even wear a heart monitor while I'm bowling to see what, where the spikes are. What did I do? What was the situation? And so the reason I say second game is first game, you could be trying to figure things out. Second game, if you're going to figure them out, you've pretty well dialed in. And then I elevate my heart rate. So I'm recording them. We're just going through strike, 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 strike. And then on the 8th frame, I'm up there, and I'm feeling pretty good. But they call the 50-50, which is it's a fundraiser. Mm-hmm. Half the money goes to whoever gets the ticket pulled, half the money goes to the youth group. And they started calling the number, and I knew it was close to mine. And I literally was just like, please don't call mine. Please don't call mine. And my doubles partner overheard me saying that, and he goes, why? And I said, if I'm going to get luck today, I want it on the lanes. I don't want the money. And sure enough, it was the person that bought behind me that won. But it was a little bit of a boost because now I'm up on the lane, and he goes, I won, and great. 8th frame strike. Well, now I'm in the 9th, and I'm thinking to myself, my son's not, so he would have been playing with a buddy of his.
Now, at this point, you were already in the Guinness book prior to this moment.
Right.
For 278. Mm-hmm. But you had not you can't pass that until the 10th frame.
Yes, well, there's a couple factors because it depends on where you missed the pin, right? Okay. If you missed the pin in the right place or the wrong place, one pin can cost you 21 pins.
So do you remember what your score was after that 8th frame when this moment happened?
You don't really have a score yet because it's not calculated until you throw your last ball.
Got it.
And
are you running numbers in your head?
Well, you just know you're on. You got the front 8 or you got the front 9. That's kind of just how people talk about it.
You got 4 strikes to go in this moment when they call the 50-50.
Yeah. Well, I had that was before the 8th one, so
3.
I threw the 8th.
Yeah, 4.
Yeah. Now I got 4.
Yeah, 4 left to hit. Yeah.
4 left to hit, and so even more of the perfectly imperfect. I was thinking about how am I going to get my son over here without, causing a ruckus or without, disturbing or without running down there and grabbing him. And he just happened to walk up and he goes, Dad, I want to go to the arcade.
Oh, God.
And I said,
seriously,
buddy, you can absolutely go to the arcade after I throw 4 more strikes. And he goes, okay. And he sits down. Of course, he has no idea what's going on here. And
does he? He doesn't?
No,
really?
He had no clue.
Okay.
And I didn't know it, but from the article, the buzz had already started in the bowling center because I was just that dialed in from what people were saying. And I knew a few people were recording. And so I hit the 9th one. I hit the 10th one. And
2 away.
Well, the interesting thing about the 10th one is I was so arrogant on the 10th one. I don't know that I've ever done anything that arrogant in my life. And so bowlers...
what makes you say that?
So typically a bowler won't go up on what could be a game like that, and most of them won't do it anyway, but they won't go up and bowl if there's a split on either lane beside them, just out of superstition. And, sometimes I don't really stick to that because I don't see them anyway. It's just a mental game. And these days, my mental game is way stronger than it was. I was a better bowler in 2009 than I am today, but my mental game is 10x what it was back then. And so I walk up, and I see this 4-7-10, which is 2 on the left, 1 on the right, split. And most people wouldn't throw. And I literally said out loud, nothing's stopping me today. And I walk up just as arrogant as you could possibly be, throw the 10th one, strike. I come back, and my son wants to give me a fist bump, so I give him a fist bump. I go back up, hit number 11. No stress there. And then my son wants to give me a fist bump. I come back and I give him a fist bump. That one's actually on video.
It's on the video.
It's on the video.
Yeah.
And I love that. So big shout out to Travis because he got that on video, and it's one of my favorite moments on this planet. But right then I had a mental break. And it wasn't because of my son. It was because when I turned around, I had this thought for just a second. No matter what happens, this is going to be a great game. And I think a lot of people let themselves off the hook that way. And I'm so glad they didn't get this on camera because I cussed myself. I was angry. I was furious with myself because I was like, it's too hard to get to right here. Why would you stop? Why would you not show everybody that this perfect moment is possible? Make them believe, make your son believe, and make you believe that you can do this. And so I got my mind right, and that ball was probably the most perfect ball I threw. I mean, everybody in there knew what was about to happen. Hit it, and it erupted. I mean, just the amount of support. You can hear it on the video. And I actually kept my composure way better than I thought I would. I always thought if I shot 300, I would just lose it. And, an interesting thing about that day is, typically in bowling, it's a fist bump or a high five. And I don't think I got a fist bump or a high five. I think every single one of them was a hug. Yeah. And we're talking about, guys that probably haven't hugged anybody in, 2 years. And nobody even went for a high five. I mean, they just straight brought it in for a hug. And these people have just been with me for so long. It was crazy.
Meaning.
Wow.
Meaning.
Yeah.
The steps gave him meaning. So cool.
Do you remember what you said before you started this story around? I think you said perfect moments. Can you remember what you said?
Well, I think people think that perfection is this long-term thing, and you can strive for it, but you're not going to be perfect forever. You're not going to be perfect for this huge amount of time, but you can strive to be good enough to be so well practiced and to do everything right. But then you have to have a little bit of luck that helps line things up for these perfect moments and they may not be perfect in somebody else's point of view, but they're so perfect that you wouldn't change not one moment of them. And I think we only get a few of those in life. And you got to hold on to them because you're going to get inspiration for future things because of these perfect moments.
Well, it's interesting. I kept thinking about that and the conflict going on within me after you said that throughout the entire story was you couldn't have manufactured that day.
Right.
It was an accumulation, and the outcome was perfect, but it was an accumulation of imperfect moments that led to that.
Right.
And there was something about that I kept trying to remember as you were telling the story, what you said earlier about perfect moments. That's not what this day was. You might have had a perfect moment, and you certainly had a perfect score, but it was a day of imperfection.
It could have been a train wreck. I mean,
and the magic was in the imperfection.
Right.
That's what that day was.
Yeah.
That's what the outcome was for me as I hear the story.
And the
it's
18-gauge needle.
Right, an 18-gauge needle. I still don't like 18-gauge needles.
So a couple things. This is you said this earlier. I don't know if this was in the first part of the conversation or in between, but you talked about layers of a bowling ball, not an onion.
That's right.
Yep. So many things that you talked about that you said, I know I perform better under pressure. So I heard you talk about how you set yourself up to be under pressure because you knew yourself so well and you knew how you performed at your best. There's some meaning, there's some leadership, lessons in all of that.
Well,
is that true? Tell me about how important it is that you knew yourself that day and how that came to fruition.
Well, I think that's one of the things that we get over time, and I think that either helps our mental game or it hurts our mental game, but you getting to know yourself so that you can put yourself in situations.
Your heart rate, the crowd,
right,
the buzz,
yeah,
all of those things that you talked about.
Well, I remember the day that I figured out that I liked the crowd because, Randy, and another big shout out to Randy. Randy used to help me. And what I mean by that is when he ran the center, because I was trying to learn, I didn't know how to bowl, much less bowl backwards. And so there was no videos back then. There was nobody to teach. There was nothing. And so I would come in and Randy would call right as they were about to cut off lanes where you couldn't get a lane anymore. And the bar was open later, like most centers. And he would call, and I was only a few minutes from the bowling center. I'd come down, and I would bowl on the other end. Nobody was around. A lot of times I was the only one bowling. And then in the city tournament, 2003, I bowled the best game I'd ever bowled. And everybody that could be packed in behind these lanes were there watching me because the tournament was in Memphis. Nobody had ever seen me. I hadn't been on TV. There were no videos. There was no nothing. And now there's this crazy guy bowling backwards, and he's shooting over 200. I had a 222 game. And in that moment, because my doubles partner at that time, which was the guy that I made the bet with, Justin Barnes, he said, Jim, there's a lot of people watching. And I looked back, and it didn't freak me out. And I had the best game I'd ever bowled to that point. And
I think the takeaway for the audience is what, many of us, I think I would put myself in the boat that I perform better under pressure, fill in the blank, whatever it is, sports, business, relationships. But not everybody does.
Not everybody does.
My wife is terrified at the idea of running like an organized 5K. In fact, when if I'm ever around or we go run together, I can't say anything to her, not even like, hey, good job. I get in trouble. She's like, that's not why I'm running, to hear you tell me if I'm good, bad, whatever. The pressure is too much. Sure. She knows herself so well, though, that how she's going to perform at her best. And it's not with the pressure. And it has started in recent years, for me, helping me realize we're all different, right? And maybe we'll get more into this, in a bit, but I don't want to leave this other thing that I thought, one thing that you said, I may get you to clarify it, but did you say I was a better bowler in 2010, but my mental game today is so much better, or some version of that? Did you?
Absolutely. And so, kind of my progression in bowling and kind of how all that came to be. So 2005, I bowled my first, I talked earlier about failing early. And so in 2003, that 222 game in the tournament, I won a side pot. And for that side pot, you went to Vegas to bowl against the other 50 or the other 49 state winners for a Cadillac. And I had decided I was winning that Cadillac. And it came down to the very last ball. I was the last person to bowl. And I knew that I needed a 5, 6, or 7 to win. They gave you an exact number, and you had to bowl that number with no gutter balls and without going over.
You had to hit that number.
You had to hit that number.
To score.
Yep. And you could be under, but then it was whoever was closest. But you couldn't go over. And I knew exactly what I needed to do. In the previous game, in order to get to this point where I'm now tied, I had to pick one pin off and then go back through the same hole. And that's almost impossible.
Wow.
Jeez.
And we're talking about I'd been bowling 2 years.
Price is right bowling.
And were you bowling backwards for this tournament?
Bowling backwards. In fact, the picture from that tournament is the oldest picture that I can find of me bowling, and it was in Vegas. So I go back through the same hole. Now it's down to me and 2 other people, and all I got to do to win this Cadillac is throw a 5, 6, or 7, and I choked because I didn't play to win. I played not to lose. So I picked up, instead of throwing the ball I should have thrown, I picked up my spare ball, and I just said, if I come in light, and it wasn't a winning mission at that point. I let myself off the hook, and I choked. I was disqualified, didn't win. I didn't get over that, I don't think, until the 300 game. That stuck with me. I was a better bowler in that moment right there, but from that moment to now, my mental game is
a mind shift, mindset.
100%. So,
and I think I posted something recently on LinkedIn that you liked, and again, just as another practical takeaway before we move here, the conversation is simple mindset shifts. So I think the quote I posted was, negative things happen, negative mindsets make them harder. Yeah. So for example, any story that you've told today, essentially, right? Or like, I'm not hurt, I'm healing. I was not rejected, I was redirected. One of the things I talked about a while back on the show is like, I used to say in doing triathlons, like, I'm not a swimmer. Until one point, I'm like, well, no, I am a swimmer. It may not be a good one, but I'm becoming something that I wasn't yesterday.
Absolutely.
Right? So it's a difference. It's how we speak. The language matters, right? And that's what I've heard throughout your story since you were in the moment, right? In the bathroom, like before you left. So that's a big takeaway for me. So, okay, Jim, one of the other layers of the bowling ball that we want to unpack here, or peel off, is the things we think and do not say. A very special segment we have with guests where we talk about, really this moment from Jerry Maguire at the beginning where he has his mission statement. It's not a memo moment. Watched that recently with the kids. It was very special.
Such a
very
great,
special.
great
The
clip.
things we think and do not say.
The future of our business.
Future of our business. Jim, what would you put into that box for you?
Well, I have a lot of them, but I think this one hits home for a lot of business leaders. And the title of what I'm working on as a book, potentially a short book, but just kind of a manual for people, is The Business Leader's Guide to Hiring Hitchhikers. And that
You don't say that. We don't do that. You don't even pick them up, much less hire them.
Right? Well, and that's where some of the controversy lies, in that, if you talk to business leaders, a lot of times they have all these challenges, and most of them come back to staffing or who they have on their team, and they'll say things like, they'll get ready to hire somebody. I really like this guy, or I really like this girl. We hit it off, or fill in the blank with all these things.
Yeah.
And
Anna Popoli, are you listening?
Yes.
right. I think you just like saying her last name.
I do.
Right?
Francisco. Popoli.
But, business leaders of all tenures make these same mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is, when you're hiring for your team, you really need to take a step back and say, what is the piece that I'm looking for? Think of it like Legos. And you know what the piece looks like. It fits in this hole, or it helps you build this. And most often it's not you. It's somebody that does this better than you. When you're hiring, you should hire to your weaknesses.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you're hiring to replace yourself. Sure. And in that case, you're looking for somebody like you in a lot of ways. But, we just hire the wrong people. And a good example of that is, I had these two wonderful leaders in one of my regions, and they interviewed this girl or young woman, and they said, she's perfect. Great. And these two leaders, they know their deal. They've been in the business a long time. And I sit down with this young lady, and one of the things that I start off with, and I've, just so everybody knows, I've made every mistake you can possibly make in hiring and interviewing. And in that time, I've learned what not to do, what to do, etc. And I'll still make mistakes. But I always ask, tell me about your dream job. And don't tell me you want my role in 5 years or whatever that is. I don't want fluff. I want, if you'd get paid as much money as you possibly want, doing exactly what you want to do, what would that be? And the reason I ask that question is it tells me where they want to go. Now, that may change over time, but right now, that's where they want to go. And if you look at a map, let's just say we're looking at a map of the United States with the interstate systems, and I've got a car. I'm in California. I want to get out of there as fast as possible.
Yes. True
and
story.
I see this hitchhiker on the side of the road. If I stop and I talk to that hitchhiker for just a moment, not that I pick up a bunch of hitchhikers, but that's for this analogy, and I got to have a question. I got to find out where they're going, right? And they got to find out where I'm going, because if they're trying to get to Alaska and I'm trying to come to Tennessee, it might be cold outside, and they may decide to get in my car just because they're cold, right? But the further we go towards Tennessee, the more aggravated they get.
So hire like you'd pick up a hitchhiker.
Ask the question so you understand where you're going and where they want to go, and if it's the right fit to go together.
Yeah. So tell me about your dream job. If you were going to get paid as much money as you possibly wanted to do what you love, where is that?
Yeah.
And so this young lady that I interviewed, she wanted to start a nonprofit, And as we talked, she had disdain. She wasn't being rude about it, but she did not like capitalism. She thought that it was a business owner's job to give the money back because they didn't deserve it. And we're talking about a commission sales role. She is not going to be happy here. She is going to be aggravated every minute that she comes into the role. She's not going to be happy with leadership because it's not in the direction she wants to go. It doesn't mean that she's bad or good. It just means she's in the wrong vehicle. And a lot of times people hire people that they like, and they're not headed in the same direction. And so they get frustrated and then explodes, and they get frustrated and it explodes. That's how they get 9 million reviews on Glassdoor and all these things.
It's a great analogy.
So, look at it from a mutual benefit standpoint. It could be that it's just money. For Pat, it was money because he was saving money to get to this next step. But for some, it's the skills that they need. It's the experience. And it's the leader's job to take the information given about where they're trying to go and to decide if this makes sense. And sometimes it means that you sit down again and you go, look, the way I see it is you're trying to get to here. Start it off by asking them what they're looking for from you as an employer and as a leader. They'll give you some of those nuggets, and it's up to you to pop in the pieces that you see and really kind of lay that out. And then understand that there's this point where they're supposed to split off, and don't get upset about it. Not everybody's a lifer with you. I mean, you can probably count on I've been in business 25 plus years, and I do have some ride or dies, but I've got more people that if I called them tomorrow and said I have an opportunity, and I asked them what their role was, what they were doing, and found out whether it lined up with where they're trying to go next, they'd join me in a heartbeat. And some of my best reviews on LinkedIn are from people that I had to let go. But when you let somebody go, you also have to look at that as that's an opportunity for them to grow. And some people will and some people won't.
Yeah.
Jim, so good to have you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
Oh my gosh. You're the first Guinness World Record holder we've ever had. Well, except that stint that I had.
Yes.
That's right.
Well, hey, one last question as we fade out here. Is there a rule that says that you can't bowl backwards? Was there someone that tried to say we should have this rule? I mean, has there been pushback on that?
Well, to give you an idea of how just amazing the people in bowling are, is back when I was doing the trick shot shows, they could not pay me what contractually they had to pay the PBA bowlers. And it was because it's spelled out specifically what they got paid, and they could not pay me that. Per the contract. It would violate their contract.
Interesting.
And so what they did for me was completely unexpected. I think it was 2007 or 2008. They put me in as one of the pages in the rule book. And so when you got to the page about legal delivery, there was my picture. And I could not. I wouldn't. It's kind of like being on the cover of
the Rolling Stones
Journal. I would never even ask for that.
Yeah.
It's not something you would even.
Yeah.
And so
with like your face with a line through it,
right?
Like that.
Pretty much.
I'm in every rule book with that, I think.
Right.
Well, what a treat to have
so
you here
much.
today, and
Thank you.
A disruptor, I guess you would say, in the bowling industry. We wish you continued success. We certainly appreciate the great work that you do, both on the lanes and in the business world, and want to continue to see you have great success. So thank you. For Jim Cripps and John Byers, I'm Colby Jubenville, and this is the Go Consulting Podcast.